At my son's wedding, his fiancée introduced me to her wealthy parents, saying, "This is that annoying beggar we are forced to put up with." Everyone laughed until her mother exclaimed, "Aren't you the mysterious billionaire who bought our company?" My daughter-in-law turned pale. "And if you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. If I stumble today, I could lose my granddaughter to winter and to a woman who mistakes cruelty for discipline." 2 hours before dusk, my front door banged open so hard my reading glasses slid down my nose. James came in on a gust of March air, cardigan askew, cheeks pink, eyes bright with that impossible light I'd only seen twice, the day he rode a bike without training wheels, and the day he got his first classroom. "Mom," he said, thrusting out a trembling left hand, "I'm engaged. Chelsea proposed." The diamond was modest, clean as a morning star. I stood, the evening crossword sagging against my knee, and hugged him. Joy vibrated through him like a current. I could have lived on that feeling for a year. When? After school, Lincoln Park by the old oak. She went down on one knee. "Mom!" He laughed, then clapped a hand to his mouth like the happiness might spill over. "Show me a picture." He scrolled, hands unsteady. The phone warmed my palm. A beautiful young woman in a tailored suit filled the screen. Charming smile. Perfect hair. Eyes already taking the measure of a room. The name beneath the photo pulled a cord tight in my chest. Chelsea Walker. I knew the Walkers from acquisitions and boardrooms. The way you know a winter by its first knife of wind. James knew none of that. To him, I was just Mom. Retired. Fixed income. A woman who saved pickle jars and bought store-brand coffee. I heard my own voice go careful. "Are you sure, honey? This family?" His smile faltered. What's that supposed to mean? I should have asked him to sit. Should have asked about her laugh, how she treats waiters, how she listens when he's tired. Instead, I let spreadsheets and whispers steer the conversation. I've read things. Deals that slid off books. A daughter whose messes vanished before they hit a docket. An affair that set 2 roofs on fire and somehow ended with a fundraiser. James yanked his phone back, wounded. "You don't know her." "You're right," I said, already losing ground. "I don't." "You looked at one picture and decided." The flush on his cheeks deepened. "She loves me. Me? An elementary teacher when her mother keeps parading executives at her." "I didn't mean—" "What did you mean?" He stepped back, clutching the phone to his chest like a shield. "I came to celebrate, Mom." Her words hit harder than any rival ever had. He grabbed his bag. I tried to apologize and tripped over my pride. The door closed in a clap of wood against frame. His engine faded up Maple Avenue, until all I could hear was the clock on the mantel, Robert's clock, and the distant, tired sigh of traffic. I sat, all of my 68 years draping themselves over my bones. The crossword stared up. 7 across. Mother's mistake. 6 letters. Too many answers fit. On the mantel, Robert smiled from a silver frame, bow tie lit with the soft defiance that kept me honest our whole life. "What would you have done?" I asked the quiet. I knew the answer. He would have made pot roast, asked gentle questions, and let a girl's character reveal itself without my ham-handed lecture. I stood, the decision forming like frost. Chelsea would meet me, not as a name she should fear, but as a woman she could dismiss. Better to see her when she thinks nobody important is watching. I called James the next morning. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice cautious. A new bruise in it I'd put there. "Mom, I owe you an apology," I said. "You deserved celebration, not interrogation. Will you and Chelsea come for dinner Saturday? I'll make your father's pot roast." The silence stretched. Kids' voices chattered behind him. Morning chorus. "Really? Really? Okay." I could hear the smile starting. "She'll love you. She volunteers at a nursing home every month. She's kind." That detail didn't appear in any file. It hooked a little hope into me despite myself. 6 o'clock, I said, "at the house." "One thing," I added, heart thudding. "Don't mention my finances to her. I'd like to keep private things private. Let her meet a mom, not a ledger. My what? He said, genuinely puzzled, which told me my quiet life had done its job. He had no idea about the other one. Saturday, I laid 2 outfits on the bed. The armor of Dorothy at work, charcoal suit, Italian shoes, a watch with a second hand that purred instead of ticked, and the clothes I wore to fix a leaky trap. Faded jeans, soft shirt, the cardigan Robert knit the winter before his last spring. The suit went back into the closet. The watch slid into the safe beside Robert's cufflinks. I left $20 in my wallet and locked the platinum away. If I was going to test a woman, I couldn't do it in a parade float. James texted at 5. We're running 10 minutes late. She's picking me up. I let the roast rest and set the table like Robert would have. Good plates, the nice forks, cloth napkins that remembered celebrations. I opened the windows to let March into the house. Cold has an honesty money can't counterfeit. Headlights swept across the front room. I heard James's laugh on the porch, the one that always made me think of wind chimes. I opened the door before they could knock. Mom. James barreled into me, lavender and chalk dust, and all the years I'd loved him pressed against my chest. Over his shoulder, Chelsea Walker took me in with one quick, clear scan. Her smile was practiced, but you can learn from practice things. Mrs. Cole, she said, offering a hand. Her palm was soft, nails manicured, grip firm for 2 seconds. Respectful without yielding an inch. Thank you for having me. Call me Dorothy. I stepped back so I wouldn't crowd her. Come in out of the cold. Smells amazing, James said, heading for the kitchen. Like Dad used to make. Chelsea's gaze flicked over the room. The thrift store lamp I'd kept because Robert loved its silly shade. The way the mantle photos focused on James's life, not mine. She nodded like a woman checking boxes. Cozy, she said. Dinner's simple, I told them. Pot roast and potatoes, green beans, biscuits, water, iced tea. Chelsea peered at the pitcher. You don't drink? Not much anymore. She shrugged. I brought a bottle, she said, holding up a French red with a label designed to look expensive from across a room. Mind if I open it? Be my guest, I said, and set 3 glasses on the counter, then quietly returned one to the cabinet. We sat. The roast fell apart under the knife, steam ribboning up like an old prayer. Chelsea asked about my retirement. I said I'd kept busy, did small maintenance here and there, walked the neighborhood to keep my knees honest. She nodded toward my shirt cuff, frayed where Robert's sewing had finally surrendered. Hard work's noble, she said, and I filed the phrasing. James tried to tell me about the proposal. She corrected a detail, small but telling. It was by the bench, not the tree, she said, smiling. Details matter. They do, I said. For 20 minutes she was impeccable, attentive to James, quick with please and thank you, complimenting the roast with the right sort of restraint. I could see why a classroom of second-graders' stories had charmed her. She laughed on time and posed questions that kept the spotlight where she wanted it, right on her, reflecting support. At the half hour the first chip showed, she asked James about the kids who had a hard time listening. Consequences, she said, tapping a knuckle against the table. You can't let softness erode standards. My parents always said the cold teaches better than the sun. James gave me a quick glance. I don't know, he said gently. I get better results with patience. Patience is a privilege, she said, still smiling. Discipline's love when you think about it. I let that sit between us like a drop in the wrong glass. To change the air, I asked her about the nursing home. Her chin lifted a degree. I set aside the first Saturday every month, she said. Chess with the residents, listening time on memory lane. I've organized donations, too. That's good work, I said, and meant it if it was true. Do you visit on off Saturdays if they need someone? She paused just a tick. The program runs on structure. People thrive on structure. We ate. I kept the tea refilled. She offered to help clear the dishes. Another check mark. then looked properly stricken when the sink, my old sink, shuddered and stuck. "Let me," she said, kneeling to open the cabinet. She stared at the pipes like a woman evaluating a sculpture, then closed the door. "You should get someone to look at that," she said, standing a touch too quickly. "Wouldn't want a mess." "I'll manage," I said. She tried again, sliding the conversation to futures, their house, their neighborhood, schools. "Highland Park," she said. "The HOA keeps things in line. We don't do sagging garages and wild lawns." "You mean people," James said, amused. "You don't do sagging people." She kissed his knuckles. "I do people who try." If I'd been a younger woman, I might have argued then and there, but age gives you the patience to collect a full picture. And sometimes the only way to help someone you love is to let the wind show them how cold it is. We moved to the living room for dessert. I served cobbler the way Robert taught me, blueberries tucked under a blanket of sweet dough, and Chelsea told a Monaco story that arrived with a car key flash and left with the faint smell of scorekeeping. The laughter she wanted landed mostly. James smiled, but his eyes did a small private thing. I filed beside the other small private things. When they stood to go, I pressed a hand to Chelsea's shoulder. Not a challenge, just a touch the way mothers do when they bless a porch after a first date. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Of course," she answered. "It's important to make a good impression." "On whom?" I asked. She smiled. "Everyone." After they left, the house sighed back into itself. I washed dishes by hand, soap squeaking against plates. A ritual that turns worry into something you can stack and put away. The clock on the mantel told me I had an hour before the pharmacy closed. I grabbed my keys and the 20 in my wallet, not because I didn't have other options, but because a test isn't honest if you peek at the answer key. The fluorescent buzz at Greenfield Pharmacy always made me feel like a child in a bad photograph. "Evening, Mrs. Cole," the clerk said, already reaching for the white bag with my name. "2 refills, BP meds and statin." I handed her my cash. She typed, blinked. "It's $46.80. I patted my pockets as if a miracle 10 might appear. "Hold the statin," I said, pretending it was no big thing. She set one bag aside. The computer chirped. "Insurance says you're out of network for this month," she said, frowning at the screen. "I can call tomorrow." "Tomorrow's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. I felt the tiny heat of shame bloom in my ears. Ridiculous, staged, and still real. Back in the car, I sat in the dim light and stared at the bag in my lap. Deceptions cost, even good ones. I decided then that tomorrow I'd fix the pharmacy flag. But tonight I'd let the lesson bite. Some truths you only learn by standing in the draft. On the way home, Lakewood streetlights floated like patient moons. I passed the nursing home near the park. In one lit window, a nurse, just a silhouette, straightened a blanket over somebody who taught a granddaughter to throw a baseball in 1958. I pulled to the curb and watched for a minute, thinking about what Chelsea called discipline and what Robert called tenderness. With a backbone. At home, I made tea and took the one pill I'd paid for. I set Robert's photograph on the arm of my chair so his eyes could keep me honest. "She's not a monster," I said. "She's a map. The question is where it leads." The house hummed in reply. Old furnace, old woman, old fears. And I decided 2 things. I would watch Chelsea on her chosen Saturday, and I would not let my own pride be the reason James learned the hard way. Before bed, I wrote 3 lines on an index card and slipped it into my wallet beside a 20 that wouldn't last a week. 1. Watch her when no one shiny is watching. 2. Ask about the one kid in James's class who scares her. 3. Cold teachers, but what? Then I stood in the hallway and looked at the door to James's old room. Closed, quiet, waiting. If I failed, the winter wouldn't just take my breath. It would take a child's, my granddaughter's one day. And I wasn't about to let a woman who smiles at frost decide that child's lessons. The first Saturday of the month came in pale and cold. the kind of light that makes parking lot puddles look like tin. I parked 2 blocks from the nursing home so I'd arrive a little winded, appropriate camouflage for a woman my age, and took my time along the sidewalk. A nurse on break hugged her cardigan with one hand and a paper cup with the other, steam lifting like a flag of truce. Inside, the front desk smelled like lemon disinfectant and winter coats. A laminated sign asked volunteers to sign in. Below it, a fishbowl of name stickers, each blank smile waiting for a name. I printed Dorothy in the kind of plain block letters that don't invite questions. Visiting or volunteering? The receptionist asked. Her voice had a night shift velvet to it, the sound of too little sleep. Visiting, I said. Old friend down the hall. A lie with soft edges. The friend existed. She just hadn't met me yet. Down the main corridor, televisions talked to themselves. A game show host blessed everyone with a new dishwasher. A resident in a lavender robe rolled slowly past me, lips working a silent song, wheels listing a little to port. I righted her course with a fingertip, and she patted my sleeve like I'd saved the ship. The activity room sat off the courtyard. Windows fogged at the corners where warmth argued with cold. Folding tables held checkerboards, decks of cards and large print paperbacks. A corkboard listed the day's events in block capitals. Music hour 10, bingo 11:30, movie matinee. At precisely 9:58, a bright voice announced itself behind me. Morning! Chelsea Walker breezed in with 2 cardboard trays of coffee, and a smile calibrated to catch every eye. She wore a cashmere sweater and a vest that looked like an expensive idea of rugged. Behind her came a young man in scrubs, all business and efficiency, arms ready to catch whatever the day dropped. You're early, the man said, approving but already busy in his head. I like to be, Chelsea said, setting the coffee on a table like a woman laying trophies. Structure helps people thrive. She let that sentence hang a second longer than conversation requires, then turned to the room. Hi, folks, it's first Saturday and I promised chess. She brought a roll-up board. She unfolded it with a flourish and began setting pieces. White pawns lined like recruits, the rooks thumping down in the corners. I watched her hands, steady, quick, theatrical when seen, efficient when not. 2 women in worn cardigans rolled their chairs closer, drawn by the familiar promise of kings and queens behaving themselves. I stayed by the door and collected the small, revealing things. When the aide, the man with the efficient movements, reached past Chelsea to move a table nearer a heater, she shifted half an inch, just enough that he bumped her shoulder instead of clearing it. She didn't apologize. She looked surprised he hadn't anticipated the space she needed. One of the coffee cups tipped and bled a brown crescent onto the table. No harm, he said, dabbing with a towel. Maybe we keep drinks on the cart. She answered with a smile that made the suggestion a decision. She sat opposite one of the cardigan women and began a game at a social speed. What's your name? She asked. Margaret, the woman said. Margaret on my mail, but Maggie when I remember. Well, Maggie, Chelsea said in a voice used for dog shows and ribbon cuttings, your knight is threatening my queen. Maggie glanced down, squinted. Which horse is mine? The one that moves like an L, Chelsea said. And then, because social games are also performances, added, You've got me pinned. She slid her queen back with a flourish toward a safer square it didn't need. Maggie's smile opened like a window. Another volunteer arrived, a college student with a backpack full of patience. The aide, his badge read Torres, handed her a stack of hymnals for music hour and whispered something that made her nod like she'd been taught the secret of fire. Mr. Torres moved like 4 people. He lowered a stubborn recliner footrest with his knee, while counting pills in his head, while answering a question about bingo prizes, while making a note on a clipboard he hadn't had a second to put down. When he finally slowed beside the coffee table, he poured 2 cups and set them by 2 men who'd been watching the cups as if they might evaporate if unclaimed. Bless you, one of the men said. Later, Mr. Torres said, smiling. For now, coffee. Chelsea won the first game in 9 minutes and the second in 7. She lost the third on purpose, the kind of theatrical blunder that makes the loser gracious. Each time she shook hands like a diplomat. Between games, she checked her watch, and once, quickly, her reflection in the window combing her hair with her fingers. At 10:30, the doors at the far end opened, and a woman I knew only by type came in. A daughter in a suit, too nice for a Saturday, talking into her phone about deliverables and roll-forward schedules. She waved at her father without looking and said, 15 minutes, Dad. Mr. Torres materialized at her elbow, light as a referee, but ready to call the game. I watched him steer her toward a chair where her father could see her eyes if she ever looked up. Chelsea's posture adjusted a notch when the suit arrived. Her voice got a fraction warmer, her laughter a decibel brighter. She made a show of yielding her seat to the suit's father for music hour, arms thrown wide like a game show reveal. You get the best chair. The daughter gave her the quick nod women give each other when they recognize a tribe. Networking as reflex. Then the small cruelty came. One of the residents, Mrs. King, according to her sweater, had a tremor that turned her hand into a metronome. She'd been watching the chess with fierce attention, mouth moving as if to taste each move. When Chelsea reset the board for the next game, Mrs. King rolled closer and reached out to touch the knight, like a girl petting a horse, through a fence. The piece wobbled and knocked over a pawn. It toppled with the sound little catastrophes make. "Whoa!" Chelsea said light, but her hand darted out too fast, and she took hold of Mrs. King's wrist to steady the tremor, thumb pressing the place where a pulse beats. For a second, the grip looked intimate. Care, control, all the words that get mixed on purpose. Then she moved Mrs. King's hand away from the board like you'd move a paw from a plate. Not rough, not gentle, efficient. The kind of touch that says, I will decide what you touch. Mrs. King's eyes lost a millimeter of light. Chelsea, Mr. Torres said, already there, already seeing. His tone was polite enough to be printed on a brochure. We try to let folks handle the pieces even if they drop. Builds fine motor and dignity. He made the last word soft, but it still cut. Chelsea smiled like she understood, though she didn't release Mrs. King right away. Of course. She let go, patted the woman's wrist as if she'd never held it, then turned her smile on Mr. Torres with a brightness that made me think of Frost. Maybe we move to cards, she said. Less precarious. We move to what Mrs. King likes, he said. Same smile, a little steel under it. And we put a towel under the board so falling pieces don't travel. She slid a towel under with the motion of a dancer, then put Mrs. King's hand back on the knight. She was a seamstress, he told me, though he wasn't looking at me. Hands remember. I'm not proud of how much I admired him in that second. I filed his name for a future donation that would arrive with no gala attached. Chelsea adjusted. She adjusted well. This wasn't a villain. This was a woman used to other people adjusting to her. Now practicing the other thing. She loosened her posture, made a joke about her own clumsiness, and when the knight fell again, she let it. It clicked against the towel and stayed. Mrs. King grinned. A girl with a horse, finally willing to be touched. When music hour started, the college student led You Are My Sunshine on a guitar with stickers on it. Chelsea clapped perfectly on 2 and 4. She stood beside a man whose voice came late to every line, as if it had to get past a snowdrift to reach the lyrics. She didn't rush him. She didn't hush him either. She typed a text one-handed between verses. At 11:15, I walked the hall to let the room change, without me inside it. I passed a door where a woman I'd never met sat alone, hands folded like a closed book. A picture of a cat was taped to the wall, edges curled. Good girl, the woman said to the empty air. I made a note to come back after lunch with a story about a stray I knew in 1973. It would likely be the truth by the time I told it. I found Mr. Torres at the nurse's station scrolling through forms that would satisfy a computer somewhere. You do good work, I said. He looked up, sharp but kind. We try. That volunteer, I said as if we were discussing weather. The one with the chessboard. She's popular. He considered me. Years in rooms like this had taught him to hear the shape of a question, not just the words. "She shows up," he said. "That matters." "Does she come when it's not on the board?" "Not usually." He capped his pen, uncapped it. "First Saturdays, then pictures for the newsletter, if I remember. Families like to see smiles." I nodded. "And you?" He blinked. "Me? Do you have what you need?" I spread a hand to indicate the everything of the hall, the chairs that fought back, the overworked staff, the budget built of compromises. It wasn't a trap. It was the question Robert would have asked. His mouth twitched, almost a laugh. "What I need is time and 3 other me's. But I'll take 2 extra warm blankets and hand lotion that doesn't smell like a hospital." "Done," I said. "Because some things you can fix without a test. They'll be on the desk Tuesday. No ribbon." He nodded once in thanks. That meant, "I believe you only if the blankets appear." By the time bingo started, Chelsea had found a camera angle. The college student snapped a few shots on a phone from a respectful distance. Hands, cards, the profile of a woman singing to herself while stamping B12. Chelsea eased into a frame here and there. Not obvious, but not shy. When she won a round, she donated her prize, chocolate-covered raisins, to the communal bowl, with a show of generosity that still left the bowl near her elbow. She left at noon sharp, the way women with schedules leave. On her way out, she stopped to thank Mr. Torres in a tone that gave her the last word. "Always good to help," she said. "We appreciate it," he answered. And if she heard the difference between help and presence, she didn't show it. She didn't see me. Or if she did, she filed me under scenery. A woman by a bulletin board. A visitor who smells like winter and tea. She walked past the receptionist, flashed the version of her smile that preserves bridges, and pushed through the doors into cold. I stayed. I learned that B12 is always worth cheering, even if you don't have it. I learned that Mrs. Martinez used to dance every Tuesday in a kitchen with yellow linoleum, and that Mrs. King's night, when it finally took a rook, drew a whisper from her that sounded like the start of a hymn. I wheeled a woman to a window so she could watch the snowless sky, and we read the car colors like we were at a racetrack where nothing moves fast. By 2, my lower back had opinions. By 3, my knees had filed formal complaints. I took the long way to the exit. At the fishbowl, I peeled my name off my sweater and stuck it to the side where a dozen other Dorothys and Marys had left their ghosts. I put $20 in the staff coffee fund because I believe in miracle workers and caffeine. Outside, winter breathed in my face. I sat in my car and let the engine warm my hands. The facts lined up. She came on schedule. She did real good in a real place. She also performed it. And when the unscripted moment arrived, a shaking hand, an unexpected spill, her first instinct was control, not a monster, a map. I looked at the index card in my wallet and added a 4th line in my careful print. 4. Watch who she is when a man who works too hard tells her no. James called while I was on Maple Avenue. "How was your day?" he asked. His voice had that Saturday looseness I love, as if the week had loosened its collar on him. "Good," I said and left it there. "Chelsea was at the home," he said, unprompted, proud. "She FaceTimed me at lunch. She taught Mrs. King to castle." "Did she now?" I kept my voice neutral. "She's good with people, Mom." He hesitated, then laughed. "Well, most people. She says the coordinator there, Mr. T something, runs a tight ship." I imagine he does. She told him he was moving a little fast with a lady. James's tone said, "Here is a point for your side, but I love the person this point is about, and I want you to love her, too." He said he appreciated the feedback. I pictured the thumb on the pulse, the delay before release. "That's good," I said. "You're doing the voice," he said, mock-accusing but with a smile. "I'm doing the mother," I said. "It leaks into the voice. Dinner tomorrow?" he asked. "She wants to show you a house she found online just for fun. Come over," I said. "We'll eat. We'll look." After we hung up, I pulled into my driveway and sat a minute, watching the thin winter light make promises it couldn't keep. Inside, the house greeted me with the old, honest noises. I took my afternoon pills and adjusted the pharmacy glitch I'd staged the night before, because deception helps no one if it spills into harm. On the mantel, Robert watched me with his wedding day defiance. Well, I asked him out loud. A woman who talks to a photograph, because it's wiser than the air. He told me nothing except what I already knew. I couldn't win James by winning an argument. I had to win James by keeping him safe without making him choose a side that would cost him more than a Saturday. I wrote another note. Small, practical. Call insurance. Fix Greenfield's network. Then a larger one. Create a pinch that doesn't bruise. In my business years, pressure revealed where a beam would crack. In my life now, it would reveal whether a woman would shore up the structure or watch it fail to teach someone a lesson. I made soup. I soaked my back. I set an extra blanket on the couch for tomorrow, in case the house tour ran long or the talk turned weather. Before I went to bed, I put 2 bottles of unscented hand lotion and a pack of thick blue blankets into the trunk of my car. Tuesday, I'd make good on a promise that had nothing to do with tests. Then I turned out the light and lay there listening, the way old houses teach you to listen. Somewhere a pipe clicked. Somewhere a heater shrugged. Somewhere a man with efficiency turned a resident so a hip wouldn't ache at 3 a.m. Cold teaches, the walkers like to say. Maybe. But I'd learned my lessons from warmth that refused to blink. I slept knowing 2 truths could sit side by side without burning the table. She had shown up and she had shown me something. Next, I would show her nothing except what the world already shows everyone when money takes a step back. A small inconvenience dressed like a storm, not to trap, to reveal. Sunday arrived with a weak sun and the kind of wind that made flags look like they were rethinking things. James and Chelsea came over with a bakery box and the brightness of people who had been scrolling houses beyond their price range and calling it dreaming. We ate soup at the table that had survived homework, birthdays, and one very bad attempt at Robert's lemon meringue. Just to look, James said, tapping his phone. We don't have to decide anything. Decisions are momentum, Chelsea said pleasantly, as if quoting a family crest. There's an open house in Highland Park at 3. She dressed Sunday casual in a sweater that made me think of yachts. When James reached for the bread, she took the knife from his hand with a smile that looked like help and cut the loaf into exact segments. Each piece the same width, each placed edge to edge like bricks. After lunch, we stood at the sink, me washing, them drying. Before we go, I said, I'd like to swing by Lakewood Hardware. The gas company flagged my carbon monoxide detector as end of life. False alarm, but I might as well replace it today. I said it the way you mention you're low on stamps. Safe is smart, Chelsea said. Good, I answered. It's on the way. I had arranged my little test the night before. Not a trap, just a pinch. A fraud flag on my debit card set to hold at $40 and released with a phone call I could make from the parking lot. I'd already tucked 2 20s behind the driver's manual if the world refused to play along. The point wasn't to extract money. The point was to see what a woman did when kindness cost the price of lunch. At the hardware store, Winter rode the automatic doors in with us. The place smelled like rope, fertilizer, and coffee older than anybody admits. I picked a mid-range detector, the kind you forget you own until it chirps at 2 a.m., and added 2 furnace filters because my mother raised me to hide errands inside errands. At checkout, the girl at the register looked 14, but wore a name tag that said Tony, like she'd been born responsible. That'll be $39.72. She said. I slid my card. The reader beeped the way stubborn smoke alarms beep, cheerful and accusatory. Declined. Try it again, I said, buying time for my face to do what faces do when pride gets a static shock. I tried again. Declined. Oops, I said, smiling at Tony in the universal language of women who forgot their wallets. Let me call the bank. I patted my pockets. James, grab your coat. You'll freeze. I looked at Chelsea, not quite looking. Hate to ask, could one of you cover this? I'll pay you back at the house. James had his wallet out before I finished. Chelsea touched his wrist. The touch was light, practiced, and decisive. Dorothy's fine, she said. We can come back later. It'll teach the bank to get its act together. And it'll remind us to plan around what-ifs. Consequences make systems improve. Tony's eyes did a small flick toward the 20-inch tower of people who won't be home with detectors tonight. She said nothing because customer service is mostly swallowing opinions. It's $40, James said softly, which becomes $400, she said. If we make a habit of covering, boundaries matter. She smiled at Tony, folding her into the lesson. We'll be back, she told her. I felt the pinch in the exact place I'd designed it to land. The part of me that raised a child on pot roast and patience, and hated to be a prop in anyone's morality play. Leave the filters, I said quietly. I'll sort it out. I nodded at Tony, grateful and ashamed, then put the box gently on the counter, as if gentleness could save a gesture from being ugly. Outside, the air had a bite to it. Nothing dramatic. A rehearsal for winter's better teeth. James tucked his chin into his scarf, thinking. He hated conflict the way rivers hate walls. Mom, We'll be late for the open house, Chelsea said, warming the car. The sentence shaped as care even as it pushed. We'll pick it up after. Structure, right? I didn't argue. Tests don't work if you lecture the frog about the pot. I told them I'd meet them there and walk to my car like an old woman. Which I was. In the driver's seat, I made the call to the bank and lifted the hold, then drove around the block and slipped back in through the garden entrance. Tony glanced up, relief like a small lamp. That was fast. Clerical nonsense, I said. I paid, bought a second detector for Riverside Manor Supply Closet on the condition no one ever mentioned me, and left 20 for the staff coffee can because I believe in softening the edges of small humiliations where I can. The open house looked like every open house, a smell designed to suggest cookies and the absence of pets, a broker whose smile reached each corner of the room like good paint, strangers judging a life by the state of someone's baseboards. James wandered with his hands clasped behind his back, a student promising to touch nothing and absorb everything. Chelsea spoke the language of comps and tax millage without being asked. In a bedroom the size of a promise, she stood at the window and watched a girl in a puffy coat ride a scooter on the sidewalk. HOA here keeps things neat, she said. It's good for families. It's good for appearances, I said mildly. Appearances protect value, she said. And when she turned from the window, her face had the faraway look of a woman seeing a portfolio where other people see a street. We don't have to like the rules, she added, magnanimous, to benefit from them. James looked from her to me. His face asked us not to make a debate from within a stranger's beige. I smiled at the model boat on a shelf and said, Some rules save lives. I tapped my pocket where a detector waited. He took my arm, thankful, and pulled me into the hallway to show me a closet with real shelves. Mom. Like houses were forts again, and he needed a second pair of eyes to confirm the fort was worth defending. By the time we got back to the car, Chelsea had already set the GPS to a second listing, then a third. She worked weekends the way some people work weekdays. Like a treadmill you can't step off without admitting defeat. I made my excuses after the second house and left them to it. Monday, I did the kind of work that leaves no fingerprints. At the county recorder, I requested what was public and kept my face as neutral as the clerk's stamp. Permits, filings, liens that spoke in 2 languages, English for the headlines and money for the subtext. A Walker LLC had snapped up properties after foreclosures in the last recession. Legal savvy, cold as the bottom stair. At 6 a.m., a civil suit sat under a docket number with a seal on the settlement. Another paper trailed a charity gala to a tax-advantaged donation that rearranged a gut-punched neighborhood story. Not criminal, not even unusual. But if you hold the pages at arm's length, a map resolves. Acquire, rehab, polish the narrative, and send the bill for the new story to the people who have to live in it. At the clerk's counter, the copy machine stuttered, faithful and bored. I took my pages and left. Outside, the wind had sharpened. A weatherman on a pharmacy TV, muted, all teeth, pointed at a blue band crawling across a map. I didn't need him. My nephew had told me last night. At home, I clipped the papers into a manila folder and wrote Walker Public on the tab and Walker Human in my head. Then I called Riverside Manor and asked for Mr. Torres. "There will be blankets in your lobby tomorrow," I told him when he came on the line, "and lotion that smells like nothing at all." "Thank you," he said with the absence of surprise reserved for people who deliver without announcing themselves twice. The pinch, if it had worked at all, would show up not in a ledger, but between two people in a car. It arrived that night as a text from James. "Dinner, just me. She's at a thing." I said yes and set the pot roast on low to teach the house patience. When he came in, he hugged me longer than Sunday, and when he let go, there was a crease between his brows, like a pencil mark. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said. The automatic fine that means, "Please set the table and don't pry." We ate with the easy talk that grows over years. After dessert, the words surfaced. "About yesterday, at the store." "It happens," I said. She nodded. "Chelsea said you were teaching the bank a lesson by walking away. She said that's how systems learn." "I was trying to buy a detector," I said. "Sometimes the lesson is your mother makes mistakes and needs a hand now and then." She smiled, then bit her lip. "She didn't let me pay." I noticed. She said, "Families need boundaries." He looked at his hands, turning the engagement ring she hadn't put there yet. "Is that true?" "Some boundaries keep water out," I said. "Some keep warmth from getting in. It's an architecture problem more than a moral one." He laughed, soft, a little watery. "Your metaphors are getting worse with age." "Age improves metaphors the way it improves soup," I said. "It just doesn't improve women as reliably." He took that in. "She Venmo'd me $40 later. Captioned, 'For Mom.' So we don't set a precedent." I felt a small heat in my chest that wasn't anger exactly. It was the body's way of saying, "Pay attention." "Did you send it to me?" "No," he said. "It felt like paying you would make the point she wanted to make instead of the one I wanted to make." "What point did you want to make?" "That I love you, and I buy you a smoke alarm without a footnote," he said. And for a second his face was 7, and he was showing me a frog that lived 2 days in a mayonnaise jar before we set it free. We cleared dishes in that companionable silence people mistake for absence. Before he left, I pressed the second detector into his hands. "For your place," I said. "No footnote." He hugged me. "Thanks, Mom." After he drove off, I took out my index card and added 2 lines. 5. When money enters the room, watch which way the warmth moves. 6. Protect channels. I drove to the all-night store and bought a pay-as-you-go flip phone and programmed 2 numbers, mine and Mr. Torres's, then put it in James's glove compartment under the registration. It wasn't espionage. It was a door that didn't lock from the outside. Tuesday morning, the blankets and lotion arrived where I said they would. Wednesday, the folder grew fatter with the kind of paper that can't shout but can hum when the wind hits it. I wasn't compiling a case. I was compiling a conscience in case someone borrowed mine. I added notes from what you can't photocopy. Sunday's slice of bread, the hardware store wrist. The way she said boundaries like a synonym for affection. Thursday night, the weather changed its voice. Even the house heard it, the old wood listening down its bones. James texted a picture of his school's playground under a sky the color of aluminum. "They say ice by morning," he wrote. "We'll be fine." A minute later, "Chelsea says we should drive downstate Friday for her parents' thing. Roads will be terrible." She says it's good practice. Good practice, I sat with the phrase. The way you sit with a thorn, evaluating whether to pull now or let fester to prove a point. I wrote one more line on my card. 7. When weather says stop, listen to weather. Then I circled it without writing the word, because you don't call storms by names if you can help it. On Friday, I put salt in the trunk and blankets in the back seat. I filled a thermos with coffee and another with soup, and told Robert's picture I was done with paper for a minute. Paper tells you where the river runs. Cold tells you how fast. The map I'd been drawing had lines enough. Now I needed to see whether the woman who loved my son could read a sky. By dawn, the town had a clear coat. Trees wore glass sleeves. The world looked improved and unwalkable. My phone did its morning chorus. Amber alerts of a different kind. School closures slid across the screen one by one until James's district joined the chorus. He texted 3 minutes later. School's closed. We'll probably leave at noon anyway. Roads treated by then. Chelsea says it's good to keep the plan. I set the kettle on and watched the back steps glaze over between clicks of the burner. Weather, like grief, moves at its own pace and asks you not to pretend otherwise. I called him. Hold off a day. We promised her parents, he said. They're doing a dinner. Nothing fancy, just family. Family can eat leftovers without you, I said. Ice can't be argued with. She says the interstate's always fine. They salt those first. Truth, I said. About the first 10 miles. Then there's a bridge no one remembers to fear until they do. He laughed, unpersuaded. You and your bridges. Me and my survivors, I said. After we hung up, I went down to the basement and pulled the bin marked winter from the shelf. Salt, a battered ice scraper with half its teeth, 2 thick blankets that remembered Robert's lap. I filled a thermos with coffee and another with chicken soup and put everything in the Buick like a mother preparing for an apocalypse no one else had RSVP'd to. Then I drove to James's apartment to be, as Robert liked to say, inconveniently helpful. The lot outside his building looked like a skating rink built by a budget committee. Patchy, treacherous, pretending at safety with a handful of sand. James met me at the door, hair in a hat, cheeks pinked by weather and resolve. You're sweet, he said, hugging me. We'll call when we get there. Or, I said, stepping into the kitchen, you could not go. He sighed, the sound of a kind person strung between 2 clocks. I don't want to start off with her mom thinking I'm fragile. Refusing stupidity isn't fragility, I said. It's coordination. Chelsea came in 2 minutes later with the weather on her coat and confidence in her step. She kissed James, nodded at me like a woman at a podium acknowledging a colleague, and took the scarf from his hands to rewrap it with a neat satisfaction in fixing what wasn't broken. Route's clear, she said, tapping her phone. And DOT cams look wet, not icy. Cameras can't feel black ice, I said, pouring coffee into the thermos. Tires can. Our tires are all season, she said, cheerful. We'll go slow. Slow doesn't help when you're sliding. She smiled at me the way polite people smile at stubborn old women. With respect, Dorothy, fear culture teaches the wrong lesson. If we stay home every time a weatherman makes a chart, we raise kids who can't drive in drizzle. I raised one who can read a sky, I said. Chelsea put a gloved hand on both of our forearms, the peace move of a teacher. We'll take it easy, she said to me. We'll text you at the county line. I hate ultimatums because they make losing a requirement. So I tried one more soft angle. Give it an hour, I said. Let the salt do what salt does. I'll make pancakes. Structure matters, Chelsea said gently to James, like a coach to a star player. We said noon. Noon. He looked at me with apology, and at her with love. Mom, I'm walking you to the car, I said. Outside, the lot puckered under our feet. I spread salt in ragged stripes while Chelsea warmed the car, the exhaust making a small fog machine of principle. A delivery van came around the corner too confidently, braked, slid into a snow pile with the slow comedy of a woman wearing the wrong shoes. No one was hurt. Everyone laughed the nervous shared laugh of people who just saw the edge of a cliff. Chelsea watched unimpressed. See, she was careless. And we, I said, are mortal. We loaded the trunk. Overnight bags. A garment bag so white it looked like a threat. My 2 thermoses. The blankets. I gave my son a hug meant to say 5 things. When I let go, Chelsea reached for his keys. She'd drive because equality was one of her favorite brands, and led the way to the driver's door. "James," I said. He turned, heard something in my voice, hesitated a centimeter. It was not enough. Chelsea slid into the driver's seat and gave me the smile people reserve for ushers. "We'll call you from the road." She had the wrong instinct, which is to prove a point by moving. She had the wrong car for the day, which is any car with tires that think November is May. She had the wrong audience, which is me. The wheels chirped. A bird under glass. James eased the car into the lane. Hairline throttle. Perfect student. 50 feet. Then a patch of parking lot shadow where the sun didn't negotiate. And the tires gave up what little democracy they had. The rear drifted, lazy, sudden. James corrected. Light hands, good training. The car answered with the bored malice of physics and spun a quarter turn, then half, then kissed the curb with a cork-pop thud. The air filled with the sound that comes after. Almost nothing, like the room had missed a beat. I moved before the brake light stopped pulsing. At James's door I tapped the glass, and he lowered it with that hush windows make in winter. His face was steady, but his knuckles had learned new colors. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said, automatic. And then, after a breath, "I'm startled." Chelsea's jaw had a new angle. "He overcorrected," she said, as if narrating footage for a jury. He reacted, I said, to ice. "It was a gentle slide," she said. "We can go." She reached past James for the gear shift like a woman reaching for a lever at a factory. My hand met hers and didn't move. I wasn't rough. I was iron. "Stop!" James looked from one of us to the other, the space between good women filling with weather. "Dorothy," Chelsea said, voice sweet with warning. "You're escalating." "I'm intervening." Something old and ungentle rose in me, the part that used to look across a table at a woman lying about a thing that would wreck 300 people's mortgages, and say quietly, "No." I stepped back, walked around to the passenger side, opened the door, and looked at Chelsea until she had to meet my eyes. "I won't be the mother who let you take him onto I-84 today," I said. "You can resent me for it. You can call me names for it. You can write a family newsletter about boundaries for it. You cannot have my son on that bridge." She smiled the way women smile when there are witnesses. "You don't get a vote." "I pay for my votes," I said. "And I'm paying now with whatever it costs to be the bad guy." She leaned in, softer. "Soft is when you should listen hardest." "James," she said without looking at me. "We promised." He put his palm on the steering wheel and stared at the frozen arc his tire had traced. "Mom's right," he said quietly. She blinked, a small freeze of her own. "About what?" "About waiting. About the bridge." He looked at me, apology and relief in the same expression, and I felt something unknot behind my ribs. Chelsea's smile adjusted like a thermostat forced down a degree. "We can practice," she said. "We can drive the back roads until you feel—" "No," he said with a tone I hadn't heard since he was 15 and done being polite to a girl. "We can practice tomorrow." The temperature in the car dropped another 10 degrees. Chelsea stared through the windshield as if the lot had insulted her. Then she turned and took James's wrist with 2 fingers, the same 2 that had pinched Mrs. King's pulse and pressed just a little, like she was checking time. "Don't backslide," she said. "Momentum matters." The glove in my hand creaked. I didn't think. I reached in and touched her hand, one finger against one tendon, a pressure used by old carpenters to release a stuck hinge. Her grip opened because anybody's will if you know where to press. I didn't raise my voice. "Get out," she laughed. "Excuse me? Get out." I repeated, and she saw then that the pleasant old woman had been replaced by someone I hadn't been in years. We're done pretending the weather is a character flaw. She didn't move. She measured. She found the edges of the room with her eyes and calculated the loss. Then she got out because there is a way a sun looks at you that tells you whether you're losing the next 5 minutes or the next 5 years. And she had just seen it. James stepped into my arms, stiff and shaking like a person who'd tried to hold himself together long enough to make someone else comfortable. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You're safe," I answered into his hat. We walked them both back inside, James beside me, Chelsea 4 paces behind, the way women walk when they're thinking about witnesses and versions. In the kitchen, I set the thermos of soup on the counter like a peace offering from a neighboring country. "You're welcome to wait here until the thaw," I said to her, "because decency isn't a lever you throw for show, or I can drive you home." "I have a house," she said, affronted by the idea that she might need a ride. "Not today," I said. "You don't." She laughed once, all contempt, then caught herself and smiled. "You're very sure of yourself for a woman who couldn't buy a smoke alarm without help." James flinched. The heat that had risen in my chest back at the hardware store found me again, and did not embarrass me this time. "Do you know what love is?" I said. "It's buying the smoke alarm anyway," she rolled her eyes. "Stoic poetry. Great." James stepped between us with that teacher's hand again. Open, calming, a human stop sign. "Chelsea, enough!" She looked at him then with an expression I recognized and did not like. The face of a woman who thinks she's been betrayed by softness. "You just let your mother undermine you," she said. "Do you want our children to learn that? That if Grandma says no, we all cancel life? If life is a bridge with ice on it," he said, voice steady, "then yes." She stared at him as if he'd chosen a language she wouldn't learn on principle. "My parents will be disappointed," she said finally, a little girl under a woman's coat. "Then they'll survive," he said. "We all will." She gathered her coat, made a small show of not needing help with the sleeve, and walked to the door. There she paused, one hand on the knob, and performed the line that told me everything. "Cold teaches?" she said. "Remember that when you're deciding what kind of father you want to be." There was a time for measured words. This was not it. "And warmth saves," I said. "Remember that when you're deciding whether to be a mother at all." She left. The building closed itself around the absence like a stitched wound. We didn't cheer. We didn't cry. We made pancakes after all because disaster averted still leaves. A hole you have to fill with something kind. We ate them on the couch under one of the trunk blankets and watched a movie where no one drove anywhere. Dangerous because of a calendar. In the early afternoon, the power blinked once, flirted with drama, then stayed. James dozed with his head on my shoulder, the weight familiar as if time didn't own us. At sunset, I took the thermos and the extra blanket back to the car and salted the steps again. In the lot, a neighbor on the 2nd floor called down, "You got any extra?" I tossed the scoop up to her, and she salted her landing like a woman who just remembered she had bones. When I came back in, James was sitting with his phone in both hands, thumb hovering. "She texted," he said. He handed me the screen. It read, "You embarrassed me today. My folks asked where you were. I said, we don't cave to panic. Tomorrow 9 a.m. Wheels up. No excuses. Love you." He watched my face. "She writes, 'Love you' like a trapdoor," he said. And the fine, sharp intelligence I'd seen in him since he was 5 stepped into the room and looked around at the decor. "Mom," he added, the question attached but not named. "Am I overreacting? You are reacting, I said, to weather. To a sentence that looks like care and feels like a leash. I took my index card from my wallet and added 8. When you say no, watch whether she hears you or waits to talk again. You already know the answer, I said. I won't say it for you. He nodded. His phone buzzed again. A new message. A different number. This one came from an unknown sender who didn't feel unknown. Richard Walker. It said, "We were so looking forward to meeting you, dear. Victoria is very disappointed, but we understand your mother has needs. We try to keep Chelsea on schedule. She thrives with structure. Tomorrow will be better. Do be brave." James handed me the phone like it was warm from some factory line that manufactures condescension. Do be brave, he repeated, a laugh catching on the phrase and dying. Brave like driving on ice for roast chicken. What if we were brave? I said, and stayed. Tomorrow? He asked. Tomorrow, I said. We make soup. We shovel a neighbor's stairs. We watch the weather teach people who want to be taught, he breathed out. And the day after? The day after, I said. You decide whether a woman who hears no as a dare should be invited to the rest of your life. He leaned into me again, and we let the evening sit without verdicts. Around 10, the radiators clinked their tired winter hymn, and the building exhaled the way old buildings do when they've decided to keep you. I dozed, woke to the blue light of a snowplow somewhere far off, and dozed again. At 3 a.m., my phone chirped with a text I did not expect. This is Torres from Riverside. Blankets received Tuesday. Thank you. Heads up, the road to the east entrance is a rink. We're calling in extra hands for morning turns. If you're awake and bored, we won't say no to a pot of coffee. I smiled in the dark. The world was full of people who asked for help at the right time with the right tone. I texted back, on my way at 6 with coffee. Stay upright. And because I was more awake than asleep, I wrote one more line on the card, my hand steady in the shaky light. 9 passive ends at the curb. If the house is safe, make another one safe. At 8, Chelsea texted James again. Where are you? We leave in 30. James typed, erased, typed again. Then he sent, I'm not going today. The roads are still bad. We can reschedule. Please stop. The 3 seconds before a reply are a country. Hers came fast. Stop what? He stared at the screen a long time. She'll come here, he said. Then she'll find pancakes, I said, and a mother she already thinks badly of. We made more batter. When the knock came at 9:15, it didn't sound like the day before. It sounded like a person asking for a witness. I opened the door to find Chelsea, hair immaculate, jaw set, apologetic smile stapled to the front of something harder. I'm here to pick you up, she said to James, not entering because she was a woman who followed rules when someone else could see. I'm staying, he said. His tone had learned overnight. She looked at me and found no leverage, so she pivoted to charm, like a woman switching tactics. Mrs. Cole, I apologize if I was curt yesterday. My parents can be... She searched for a word that would flatter her own criticism. Ambitious. They can be patient, I said. She chuckled as if I'd made a joke. We'll be careful, she promised, like a salesman guaranteeing the weather. James stepped closer to me. That was the midpoint. No fanfare, no gunsmoke. Just the exact half of a story where the person you love moves a foot in your direction while someone else talks about discipline. No, he said simply. It's a small word that sounds like a door, and she heard it that way. She looked from him to me like a woman checking exits. Okay, she said at last softly. Okay. She kissed his cheek, cold and rehearsed, then left in a way that advertised her ability to accept disappointment. I watched her from the window. She crossed the lot like a lesson, slid once, saved it, turned and looked at the building as if it had failed a test. Then she got into her car and drove away slowly, as if that had been her idea all along. James let out a breath I suspect he'd been holding since the hardware store. He leaned his head against the glass. Thank you, he said. Keep that thank you for yourself, I said. You did the hard part. We did it, he countered. We ate pancakes until the kitchen smelled like a better plan. Then I took the thermos and the blankets to Riverside Manor because when you decide to be warm in a cold town, you don't stop at your own doorstep. Mr. Torres met me at the door with that nod of his that spends gratitude wisely. We made it through the night, he said. Morning will try us. We'll try it back, I said, and poured coffee into a dozen hands that have earned every cup I'll ever carry. By afternoon, the sun chewed the edges off the ice, and you could hear the town begin again. Buses whispering, dogs remembering lawns, children testing forbidden puddles with one brave toe. I went home tired in the good way. At my mantel, Robert's picture had collected a little dust from the morning's comings and goings. I wiped it gently with the corner of my sleeve. Passive is over, I told him. He told me nothing and everything with the same smile. On my card, I drew a line under the 9th note and left a blank space beneath it. There would be time enough to fill it at a church and a reception hall, and in a room where 2 sets of parents try to decide what kind of weather they are. For now the roads were thawing and my son's car was parked. Sometimes that's the only miracle you need. The ice melted into memory, and the city dressed itself for company. By Friday, sidewalks flashed puddles that pretended not to be cold, and every lobby in Lakewood smelled like starch and flowers. The rehearsal dinner was at Oakwood Bistro, because someone had decided rustic meant napkins tied with twine. James wore a blue suit Robert would have liked. Honest, unshowy, and he floated through the room like a person splitting himself into greetings. I hugged cousins I hadn't earned, and shook hands with women who introduced themselves as operations, as if that were a first name. Victoria and Richard Walker arrived 24 minutes late, the kind of late that throws a leash over a room. The maitre d' pulled chairs as if the algorithm demanded it. Victoria kissed James's cheek and left the lipstick mark like a signature. "Traffic!" she sang, even though traffic moves for some people the way curtains do. Richard's handshake was a resume. "Dorothy," he said, appraising me with a smile fitted by a jeweler. "At last." "Richard," I answered. "Welcome." It cost nothing to be polite, so I paid. They took the head table as if it were owed, a math problem solved by inheritance. Richard launched into a story about weathering the .com crash, as if it were a storm she captained away from rocks, by will alone. Victoria made small sounds that affirmed genius. When a server spilled a single drop of wine near Richard's cuff, she said, "Attention to detail is free." Pleasant as a hymn. James squeezed my hand under the table. "There you are." And I squeezed back. Still here. Across from us, Chelsea performed ease with her parents. The back of the hand touched to her mother's wrist. The deferential, "Dad." The small, bright laugh that credits the joke to the right person. She was excellent at being a daughter, the way she was excellent at most things that show. I stood for a toast, not because I wanted to speak, but because silence can be mistaken for consent. "I'm Dorothy," I said, raising water. "James's mother. I don't have the Walkers' weather stories. My world was always the room I could heat, a table I could set, and the door I could open when the wind knocked harder than pride. I looked at my son, who had learned to be brave without mistaking it for cold. I'm grateful for everyone who loves my boy, and I'm grateful we're all here together, long enough to practice it. It wasn't much. It was honest. People clinked. Somebody with a microphone tried to hand it to Richard. She declined with a princely flick. Tomorrow would be her stage. Later in the lobby, Victoria found James by the coats and held both his hands. I heard only the last sentence. "And be brave, dear." The same factory label she'd texted. James smiled the way sons smile at mothers they don't want yet to call by their first names. When Victoria turned, she laid 2 fingers on my forearm. "The way you touch a thermostat. We're so glad to be folding him into structure," she said. "He already stands," I answered. "Structure optional." Her smile didn't move, but I saw there in the eyes the private calculation of a woman fleshing out a family budget with other people's temperatures. On my way out, I watched Richard tip the valet with a bill that made the kids' night while telling him, "Perfect. Kindly work on your posture." The boy straightened like a puppet pulled from heaven. Gratitude does funny things to a spine. Wedding day rose pale and warm for February. Sun on old stone like a kindness the church hadn't asked for. St. Mary's smelled the way churches do. Wood that remembers hands. Flowers that are trying their best. And dust that insists on being part of the liturgy. I arrived early with a paper bag of safety pins, mints, and a screwdriver because some emergencies don't need prayer so much as torque. In the groom's room, James stood in a half circle of men, colleagues in suits they'd never wear to school, while a friend threaded a boutonniere to a lapel with battlefield focus. James saw me in the mirror and smiled, that private smile that has been mine since he first discovered mirrors. "You look beautiful," he said. "Robert's pearls," I answered, touching the strand like a reliquary. On a side table sat a neat manila folder that didn't belong at a wedding. I had seen too many of them not to know the scent of one. The tab read simply, "Covenant." Beside it, a fountain pen, a little too pleased with itself, rested on a leather portfolio. I glanced. I didn't touch. Chelsea breezed in with bridesmaids who smelled of perfume and good intentions. She kissed James on the temple without touching his hair. "Points," complimented the boutonniere. "Details matter." And then, with a host's ease, planted 2 documents on the vanity-like hors d'oeuvres. "Quick logistics," she said. "Low, a woman handling nonsense on behalf of a groom. Insurance waiver for the venue. Boilerplate, I promise. And a short family covenant my parents like everyone to sign. Expectations, emergency plans, that kind of thing. Makes holidays smoother." "Not today," I said, almost conversationally. Before James could reach, she smiled at me the way patient women smile at women they plan to outlast. "It's truly 5 seconds, Dorothy." I met James's eyes in the mirror. "Sign nothing big on a big day," I said. "That's not law. It's weather sense." He laughed, grateful for a rule that didn't require a fight. "Rain check," he told her gently. "I'll read it after." She didn't push. She adjusted. She slid the papers under the portfolio, with a movement that told me she'd planned 3 ways for this to go, and we'd selected Route B. "Later is fine," she said, and kissed his hand in a way that made the room sigh on schedule. She left. The groomsman exhaled. I fixed the back of a small button with my screwdriver, and the room loved me an extra inch. When we were alone again, James touched the folder. "Is it awful," he said softly, "that the word covenant doesn't feel like love to me?" "It sounds like the opposite of a story," I said. "It sounds like a rule that assumes love will fail." He nodded. We didn't have time to unpack the theology. The coordinator, tiny, merciless, holy, clapped her hands. 30 minutes, people," she said. "Hydrate or perish." Down the hall, the walkers made an entrance as if the sun were late to their morning. Victoria's dress whispered, "Money." Richard's cufflinks flashed rivulets of light like expensive snow. The bride's side gathered itself around them, the way iron gathers to a magnet. When the coordinator asked them to move inside for photos, Richard smiled at her with the apex of courtesy, and did nothing at all. "Ms. Walker," she said a half-beat later, same tone, a thread of steel beneath it. "We're lining up." "Of course," she said, moving without moving. And then she did, because even people who believe they make the weather respect a woman with a clipboard. 5 minutes before vows, I stepped into the sacristy to breathe. The room held the chill 1,000 candles couldn't vanish. Through the cracked door, I heard the staticky babble of a crowd, ready to witness something they could discuss in the car later. On the table rested a set of old rings used for classes and ceremonies, heavy as promises made in a century that didn't know us. The door eased wider, and a girl in a miniature dress sidled in, powerfully small. She was 6, maybe, with a hair ribbon looped and praying to hold, clutching a basket of petals like a life preserver. Bathroom. She whispered to the room, which is how children ask for help, apologizing to air. Left, then left, I said. She didn't move. Her knees knocked once, a tiny metronome. Want company? I asked. She nodded without giving me the dignity of language, so I walked her to the door. In the hall, a woman, not her mother, a cousin with too much mascara and a timeline in her phone, hissed, "You're late. Emma!" Then knelt to retie her ribbon with the fury of people embarrassed on a schedule. Chelsea arrived mid-knot. "Sweetheart," she said cheerfully. "Remember what we practiced? No mistakes, right? You can do it." Emma nodded so hard her hair moved. The ribbon slipped again because hands are traitors. She started to cry in the dusty, choking way girls do when the world is telling them they're interrupting a production number. "It's okay," I said, crouching. "Ribbons are liars. Happens to everyone." Chelsea's smile tightened one half-turn. She took the basket from Emma and then, fast, neat, controlled, took the girl's wrist in the same 2 fingers she used for pulses and steering, pressed just that pressure point and said, "Soft enough for the hall, but not for me. Control. Okay, we go on in 3. Her grip wasn't cruel. It was efficient. It said, "I will direct your body until your soul catches up." Emma froze like prey does. Her knuckles went pale where my son's hand would someday rest if he kept walking toward the aisle. Memory had its say in me. The nursing home. Mrs. King's hand moved from the night. The hardware store. James's wallet intercepted. The parking lot. A wrist that thought it was a lever. I looked up and in the tiny convex mirror of a fire extinguisher, I saw James behind us. Unseen. He had come early, boutonniere in hand, to ask me to fix a loose thread. He saw that hand on Emma. He saw the demonstration given by a woman who calls control kindness. There was no speech. There was not even a word. It was what story people call the recognition. The map suddenly the territory. He didn't make a scene. He stood very still, then stepped back like a deer who has decided the path where he stands is not a path after all. I stood. Chelsea released the girl, patted her shoulder. "We've got this, sweetheart." Handed her off to the mascara cousin, and turned to find me between her and the room like an inconvenient piece of furniture. "Everything okay?" she said, the pleasant actor again. "Ribbons," I said. "A menace," she smiled. "We'll start in 1. I went to the groom's room because that is where I was supposed to be. James stood at the mirror with his boutonniere in his hands like a net he wasn't sure he wanted to wear. Behind him, the manila folder waited under its portfolio, like a snake napping under a hat. "You saw?" I said gently. He nodded. I saw what I already knew how to see. His voice didn't tremble. His hands did. I thought... He stopped. "It doesn't matter what I thought. I see." I put my palm on the place where Robert used to rest his when words needed a place to land. "We can do anything," I said. "We can go out there and you can marry her, and we will love you through whatever math those days become. Or we can walk out the side door and I'll carry your jacket. None of it will change the fact that I am yours, and you are mine. Today doesn't scare me. Losing you does." James closed his eyes and then opened them with the decision already in them. He folded the boutonniere in half, then in half again, then laid it on the chair like a soft surrender to a different battle. "I want to go home," he said. "Okay," I said. We told the coordinator first because she deserved the respect. Her eyes widened for 1 second and then narrowed into logistics. "Give me 5 minutes," she said, already moving, already shielding. "You 2 stay put. If you must leave, take the north stairwell. But I'd rather we say it in the room once." "We?" James asked. "It'll be my voice if you want it," the coordinator said. "But yours will be better." We waited in the little white box of a room that now had too much air in it. Voices swelled in the nave, music testing itself, whispers finding the pitch of rumor. The world loves a story. It loves a collision more. Then the door opened and Victoria entered without knocking, as if she were the owner of all doors. Her smile was a mirror people check just before they step on stage. "Darling," she said, "we're beginning." She saw the folded boutonniere and faltered half a beat. "Is something wrong with the flower? We can fix it." "I'm not going out there," James said evenly. Victoria's smile became a tool. "Nerves are natural," she said. "Be brave." James's laugh had no humor in it. "I'm done being brave about the wrong things." Victoria shifted to flanking fire. "My guests are seated," she said, as if that were a sacrament. "Richard's associates flew in from—" "I'm not going out there," James repeated. Victoria turned her eyes to me the way a person turns to a camera when they want their good side recorded. "Mrs. Cole," she said, soft with judgment, "this is the moment when a mother does not indulge." "Victoria," I said, gentler than I felt. "This is the moment when a mother chooses to be a mother, or an event planner. One of those jobs can be rehired." She stared at me long enough to decide I wasn't useful, then left because the room she wanted to control was bigger. 2 minutes later, we were standing at the front of St. Mary's, not in satin but in ourselves. The coordinator had hushed the musicians, closed the side doors, and turned the body of the church toward us with a dignity that made the pews look like a jury. Chelsea came down the aisle with her mother's hand on her shoulder. A tableau of disappointed women. She looked at James. She assessed. She painted on a face labeled hurt, but magnanimous. The pastor, poor soul, opened his book to a blank page and took a breath. James beat him to it. "Thank you for coming," he said, voice steady, carrying Teacher True. "There won't be a wedding today." The words did the thing words do when they are simple and true. They changed the weather. You could feel air leave lungs. You could hear jewelry clasps falter. You could watch women take out phones, because that's what some women do when the sky goes red. Chelsea raised both palms in the diplomacy of crisis. "We're having a private moment," she announced to the room. "Please give us—" "No," James said without looking at her. "I'm not marrying you." Even then, God help her, she moved to control the scene. She leaned in, voice for his ear. "You're overreacting," she whispered. "We can practice. Momentum matters." "Stop," he said. "Oh, please stop." She reached for his wrist. Those 2 fingers she'd used to instruct a child. Half the pressure she'd used in the hall. My body moved before my mind voted. I slid a hand between hers and my son's skin with the old carpenter's trick, touched one tendon, and opened a hinge. The sound the room made then was not gasping. It was recognizing a map they'd all traveled without reading the legend. Richard stepped forward like a lawyer approaching a podium. "Dorothy," she said, the name in objection. "Let's manage this away from witnesses?" I asked, calm without effort. "No, thank you." Chelsea looked out at the faces, as if she could still win the optics. "We've had a misunderstanding," she said to the crowd. "Love is not a schedule," James said so cleanly the pastor actually closed his book. He looked at the flower girl. Poor Emma with her newly conquered ribbon, then at the coordinator with her clipboard, then at me. "Love is warmth that doesn't flinch," he said. "And I won't spend my life learning how to be cold, to make other people comfortable." Silence. Then from somewhere in the back where the folding chairs live, a single clear voice. Amen. It was not a churchy amen. It sounded like a nurse who'd worked a night shift and was done being polite to a woman who thought he was furniture. When I turned, I saw Mr. Torres leaning in the doorway in his off-duty sweater, eyes bright. He must have come with one of the residents' sons. Or maybe the world had simply arranged mercy in the shape of a person who tells the truth. It didn't become a scene beyond that. The coordinator, elevated to saint in my private calendar, stepped up, thanked people for their time, invited them to the hall for food that had already been paid for, and told them with authority that they were not to seek explanations from the groom. Then she looked at me. "North stairwell," she mouthed. "Jacket optional." We left by that narrow side, not as fugitives, but as 2 people choosing a smaller room. The winter light outside was brighter than it had any right to be. The parking lot smelled like cold and car exhaust, and a bakery 2 streets over trying to keep up with Saturday. We walked to the Buick without speaking because sometimes speech reduces a thing that deserves to stay wide. I opened the passenger door. James climbed in, then reached out and took my hand. "I'm sorry," he said. Not for her, not for the guests, not for the money Irene from catering had already earned, but for the weight a son is taught to carry when he disappoints the script. "For what?" I asked. "For thinking I had to be brave about a kind of cold that only teaches itself," he said. He smiled, raw and fierce. "Let's go home." We drove the long way because the long way isn't about distance. It's about letting the shock metabolize without a show. On Maple Avenue, the old oak out front flickered last summer's leaves, in a way only my house could hear. Inside, I made tea that tasted like every winter we'd survived. We sat at the table that had learned us, and I called St. Mary's to make sure the caterer fed everyone anyway, because kindness wasn't a casualty of the day. While the water boiled, I took my index card from my wallet and wrote 10. Truth doesn't need a speech when a son says no. Then I tore the card in half because the list had done its job. The rest would be living. My phone buzzed itself across the table. A text from an unknown number introduced itself with a tone. "Richard," it read. "We will send a car to collect the ring and the gifts delivered to your residence. Kindly be available." I stared at the words the way you stare at a treadmill trying to sell you scenery. Then I typed, "The ring will be returned by mail. The gifts will be forwarded at our expense to a shelter of James's choosing. Kindly be well." She did not text back. Victoria did 80 seconds later. "I regret your influence. Chelsea is heartbroken. Structure would have helped." I didn't answer because sometimes silence is the only warm thing you can give to a person who thinks cold is a curriculum. James and I ate soup in the quiet we'd earned. After I drove to Riverside Manor with 2 trays of food that would outlast anyone's appetite for spectacle. Mr. Torres met me at the door with that specific nod of gratitude that never becomes debt. "Big morning?" he asked, eyes quick. In the meantime, I invested my anger like money I wanted to see do some good. I took blankets and lotion to Riverside Manor until Mr. Torres stopped pretending to be surprised. We made a little fund with a name that embarrassed us both. Warm hands, warm rooms. Seated by the unused centerpiece budget, and matched by quiet checks from people who had believed James at St. Mary's and decided belief should come with a receipt. The college student traded her stickered guitar for an old upright that, church was retiring, and music hour became something that could lift even a stubborn Tuesday. Mrs. King died in May. She went while the lilacs were bossing the sidewalks. Quiet, not alone. The last time I saw her, she had the night on her windowsill, and a hymn in her throat she didn't have to finish. We put the chess piece in her pocket because sometimes a woman deserves to carry the thing she learned how to hold. I took the long way home from the funeral and stopped at the hardware store. Tony had graduated to a name tag that said manager on a ribbon someone had bedazzled when no one was looking. We laughed about the smoke alarm that taught me something I didn't need to learn. And I bought 3 more. For the house, for James's apartment, and for a friend of Mr. Torres's whose niece liked to cook and forget. $40 felt like a tithe I owed to a god I could actually serve. James set boundaries I didn't have to enforce. He blocked numbers not out of spite, but out of the knowledge that silence can be a kind of sermon. When an embossed card arrived in June announcing a Walker Foundation gala to benefit resilience initiatives, he scissored it into a stack of gift tags and used them at Christmas. "Recycled resilience," he said, deadpan, and I laughed the good kind of old woman laugh, the one that leaves room for youth to echo back. Summer softened us. We learned that errands shared are better than grand gestures. We made soup for neighbors without posting about it. James went back to teaching in August with a new chair that didn't punish his back, and a rule on the wall that read, "Warmth first, boundaries second, consequences third. Never the other way round." His students called him Mr. Cole, until they got the hang of the new name he would take later. And even then, half of them forgot, because children are terrible record keepers and excellent judges of weather. Once in the grocery store a month after St. Mary's, I ran into Chelsea. It was the wrong aisle for a reunion. Paper goods, a fluorescent tunnel of boring. And for a second we were two women choosing napkins, while a country's worth of unspoken things tried to climb out of our jackets. She nodded. Civil. I nodded back. Same. She started to speak, then thought better of it. Or maybe she weighed the sentence. She'd packed for me and found it off balance. On the cart. She left with a package of something. Biodegradable and a face that looked like it had practiced letting go without mastering it. I felt no triumph. Winter leaving is not a victory. It's a season minding its business. In October, a nurse at Riverside Manor taped a photo to the bulletin board. Mrs. King at her last bingo. The night on the towel. Mr. Torres in the background doing 5 things. Under it, "Thank you, Dorothy and friends." I tried to peel my name off. He smacked my hand away. "Let people thank the right person once in a while," he said. "It won't kill you?" "I have evidence to the contrary," I answered. "But I'll try." When the baby came, Winter had already put one finger on the town's shoulder and said, "Soon." The morning before, I'd fixed the old draft by the back door. A bead of caulk, a thin rope of weather stripping, and had the self-satisfaction of a woman who wins small fights against entropy. In the delivery room, the doctor said words I didn't hear because my son was in the kind of pain that makes mothers believe in exchanging their lungs for someone else's. When the cry arrived, it sounded like hope relearning itself. In the nursery, I stood with a paper bracelet on my wrist that called me what I'd finally earned. Grandparent. The girl frowned like she was already passing an index card. The mother, kind woman, steady, stood beside me, and we practiced the quiet that only women in rooms like this practice. Grateful without theater, humbled without apology. Later there would be names. There would be a ceremony with cake made by hands that had iced more birthdays than weddings. There would be a high chair and a drawer that held nothing but washcloths, and a carpet the color of spilled oatmeal. The world would fill with tiny objects that never returned to the same place twice. For the afternoon there was a rocking chair, a window, and a small person who had never seen snow. "Do you want her?" the nurse asked. "I already do," I said. And she laughed because mothers say corny things when they've survived winter. She weighed less than my old tool bag. She weighed more than every case I'd built against the cold. I held her and told her a story not about weather but about roofs. "This house keeps you," I said under my breath. Not because babies understand English, but because grandmothers need to hear themselves promise it. Inside these walls, warmth first, boundaries second, consequences third. You won't learn discipline disguised as love. You'll learn love with a backbone. I didn't mention the walkers. She wouldn't need that map. By the time she was choosing her own roads, the file in my safe would be brittle and irrelevant. If the world tried to teach her that control was care, we'd show her the difference with biscuits, and repaired doorknobs and the kind of calm that doesn't have to raise its voice to become a climate. We went home 2 days. Later to a house that smelled like history and laundry. I installed the new smoke alarm in the hall and let it chirp once so the baby would learn early that some warnings are for protection, not panic. James slept in his old room with the baby on his chest and a sign on the door scribbled by me that said, "Do not knock unless the house is on fire." And even then, think it through. In the evenings, I walked the baby around the living room and gave her tours of objects that had kept us alive. Robert's clock, the pot roast pan that had broken and mended us in equal measure, the adjustable wrench that knew every trick a carpenter's thumb did. "This is a night," I told her one night, holding up the carved horse I'd taken home from Riverside Manor's donations the week we turned the activity room into a chess club. "It moves in an L, which is a funny way to move. You'll hear a lot about straight lines. Don't believe all of it. James would wake, listen, laugh at our lectures that sounded like love letters, then drift back into the kind of sleep that belongs to people who have done brave things without clapping for themselves. Sometimes he'd stand in the kitchen at 2 a.m., hair in a pile, baby in the crook of an elbow, and we'd eat toast over the sink like a sacrament that required crumbs. Once he said, "I keep waiting to feel guilty." "For what?" I asked. "For not being brave in the way they wanted." He said, "You were brave in the way you needed." I answered, "That counts in rooms where weather isn't for show." In January, a card came from Victoria. The handwriting was smaller, the paper thicker. It said, "We hear your news. We wish you health. Perhaps one day we can meet the child and start again, with structure." James read it, smiled without malice, and put it in a drawer with warranty cards. "Maybe one day," he said, "when structure means nap schedules and smoke alarms." We didn't reply. Mercy sometimes looks like not returning a volley. I kept volunteering at Riverside Manor because the place had taught me more about climates than women with portfolios ever could. Mr. Torres let me run chess and stories on Thursdays if I promised to lose convincingly. I brought the baby once in March, and every hand that touched her did so with a miracle's restraint. "You're doing fine," one woman told her. "Keep your socks on." She tried and failed. We clapped anyway. On the first warm day of April, I took down the storm windows and opened the house. Air moved through rooms that had earned it. James sat on the porch with the baby and a book he wasn't reading, and we watched neighborhood kids negotiate puddles with a seriousness that would have made Chelsea compose a lesson and would have made Richard dictate one. We offered neither. We put a bowl of chalk on the steps and a rag for wiping knees, and the block governed itself by the oldest law there is: pay attention to the small people first. That night I found the index card again behind the soup cans. I'd meant to throw it away at the hospital, and hadn't. I read the 10 notes and felt gratitude for the woman who'd written them while she was scared. I kept number 9, passive ends at the curb, and threw the others in the compost in the garden under the oak that had seen us through. I turned the soil with my hands until old paper became food for tomatoes I'd try and fail to grow straight. Summer will come. Winter will return. The girl will learn to walk and then to argue. The world will try to teach her that momentum matters more than mercy. We'll show her another lesson. When she reaches for a knight and knocks it over, we'll put a towel under the board and let her try again. When she cries because a ribbon betrays her, we'll tie it slower than is efficient. When someone calls control love, we'll open a hinge with one finger and make a room where warmth doesn't flinch. On the mantel, Robert's photograph kept smiling, unchanged by seasons. I set a newer one beside it. James on the porch with a baby asleep against him. A blanket tucked the way my late husband used to tuck every soft thing in our house. The furnace clicked, a memory of winter choosing not to speak. Outside the town practiced evening. I put water on for tea and cut 2 slices of bread, because habits are the only liturgy I trust. The house hummed with the small noises of people who are safe. I could have called that a happy ending. I preferred to call it a warm beginning. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word maybe. Tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.